lot of NBA stuff to get into today. I'm very excited about it. We're obviously going to be breaking down games 3 and 4 of the NBA Finals. Some coaching news also came up, but two lower hitting topics that I wanted to get into, a LeBron James topic and a little bit of rumors with the Trailblazers. So those will be our two little warm ups right here, real quick. So we'll talk about LeBron real quick. Kind of cool. I thought it was a cool stat being named as a network of 1 billion according to Forbes magazine, the first active player in the NBA history to do that, which will happen when you're playing as you get older, I guess, and you're the best NBA player in a very long time, or potentially of all time, depending on who you want to talk to. He also made some comments about wanting to start up an NBA franchise in Vegas, which I thought was an interesting comment. And obviously, Adam Silver has in the past talked about Seattle again and Vegas as two hypothetical expansion teams, although it doesn't seem like that's on the horizon. But at least maybe LeBron James planting some seeds now to try to, you know, what does all the kids say? Manifest that down the line.
Yeah, speak it into reality, whatever that may be. Yeah, it sure feels like that if the NBA expands, that Seattle's a lock. I think there's nobody doubts that.
You have to.
It was always that second one where is it Vegas? Is it Kansas City? Is it Louisville? Is it international? Do you go back to Canada again? Do you go to Mexico City? I think it sure does feel like it's going to be Vegas. And I've said this on the pod before, but was totally wrong about Vegas as a sports market. I remember when Vegas got the Golden Knights and they went to the Cup their first year, which is still insane. They didn't win it. They lost to Washington, but just outrageous. Your first year as an expansion team, you're in the Stanley Cup final. They really, really got behind that team. And it was like impressively got behind that team. And since have done so, in multiple sports now, you've got the Raiders there, obviously electric last year with that stadium opening. You've got, even with the WNBA, like the Aces have been one of the premier franchises here over the last couple of years. A lot of big names there. Becky Hammon is their coach now. So obviously, that's a name that's been floated on a number of NBA rosters. So yeah, Vegas has definitely proved its worth as a sports town, like even beyond Summer League. It kind of did feel like that. And I wonder to that extent if the NBA doesn't try to keep Summer League holy and kind of like put it in its own area, so that way it's almost a draw in a way. Because that was the thing about Vegas, is like, yeah, you don't go there during the NBA season, but everybody converges on it for summertime. That's basically why that's why Orlando Summer League essentially folded. I know Utah still has that small one, or at least I think they did. I don't know post pandemic, but I know they had a couple teams that went there.
Well, and you actually to the pandemic, I wonder if that kind of delays or adds a little hesitancy to maybe Adam Silver or the NBA to have another Canadian team between travel restrictions and how things are handled differently. I don't know. Maybe it's not a problem and they don't worry about that, but it's definitely something that would probably come up in conversation in the next few years if they do talk expansion teams.
Well, yeah, because you got to figure it out. Toronto's fan base is obviously great. I know I love to trash talk them a little bit.
But during COVID, they had to move them to Tampa. They had to move them.
The Tractors. But yeah, no, going back to LeBron a little bit, or circling back, because I'm with you. I do think it'll be Seattle and Vegas. I completely understand why LeBron. The other MJ that made a ton of money playing basketball and just crushing all his off the court endorsements, obviously owning the Hornets right now, and we'll get into that later with Kenny Atkinson getting hired down there. MJ obviously a huge role in that as the owner of that franchise. But and back with LeBron being a billionaire, here's the thing. Like, I have two stances on, I have a couple stances on this. Obviously, in terms of what he's done off the floor is absolutely incredible. And I think LeBron is like notorious with his generosity. When you look at the I Promise School and what that does for the kids in the Akron area, and is able to get them, into college and pay entirely for their college tuition, like that's a remarkable deed. He's also apparently building a hospital in the area, which again, like for a place that may not have access to healthcare, and to provide affordable healthcare to that area in a country that frankly has a confusing, jacked up healthcare system, to say the least. That's a remarkable good deed. Now, the other part of me across the board is saying every billionaire should get taxed as soon as they make over $1 billion, because it's borderline hoarding wealth. But yeah, when you look at LeBron, it's the crazy part about LeBron James to me is not just on the court, but off the court as well, where you look at the spotlight that he's been in since he was 15 years old, essentially. Getting tapped as the chosen one, getting all this pressure, and the fact that I forget who said this in an interview the other day. I think it was Doc Rivers actually. Um, for LeBron to be better than we ever would have expected and to live up to all that hype and
Hmm.
more is remarkable. I mean, it is like when you talk about, I mean, at least in terms of basketball alone, I mean, it's MJ and LeBron. Like you can have that debate all day long, but it is those two to me on a tier above everybody else. You
Yeah.
can argue the 3 to 10 all day because I mean, Lord knows, I think Steph Curry should be in that top 10 if we're going to really get into that too. But that 1 to 2, like it really is rarefied air up there. And the fact that again, MJ, I mean, and again, Doc said made this point as well, where it was like Michael Jordan was really good in college. I mean, he hit the game winner in North Carolina, but he was a number 3 overall pick. Like, I think people knew he was going to be good, but I think there was an element of surprise, a little bit of quite how good he became. Where LeBron, like, there was no hiding from LeBron. Like, he was telegraphed from day one.
Well, and I
Um,
think to that, it speaks a lot. And I know people will point out some flaws that he has here and there, but for the most part, there wasn't ever like a big LeBron fallout. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
it seems like with superstars, and I would say, well, no, Tom Brady had because he had Deflategate and all that stuff. So yeah, there was a little bit with Tom. Like you never really had a situation like that with LeBron, to my knowledge.
No, I mean, any people that don't like LeBron, it's either
It's
usually
political
A,
usually.
political,
Yeah.
or B, I mean, there have been things like there have definitely been petty moments, and
Sure.
I think LeBron the GM has kind of created some things as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But that to me is where it is. But I mean, yeah, 4 titles, 3
Mhm.
different franchises. So, um,
I think by the way, I saw Tiger Woods just broke into the
he
billion
did.
club with this as well. So that's pretty cool to see as well. The other thing I wanted to bring up was a rumor. I think Athletic put this out. Was some league sources saying that the Blazers are exploring trades to get somebody to pair with Dame Lillard to hopefully get them back into the postseason. Um, what they pointed out was they have the seventh pick in the draft. So that is a pretty big asset that they can use. They also have a bunch of young players that they could also potentially use in that situation. And then in that article, the first two names that they popped up were Bradley Beal and Zach LaVine. And I'm like, what are those guys any different than CJ McCollum? Like, if you're gonna do it differently.
Whoa! Wow. Okay, we're
No, but
getting
like, you know what I'm
spicy
saying?
in the
Like,
warm ups.
no, it's not that it's spicy. It's just like CJ McCollum and like that's pretty similar, right? Like if we're right?
I don't think either of them can necessarily defend either, but wait a minute, hang on. That's a massive upgrade over CJ McCall. And I love CJ.
Is
I
it
know what
though?
he yes, I do think in Bradley Beal and
Mhm.
Zach Levine's case, more of Levine because I think Levine is younger.
Sure,
Granted,
Levine,
you have more
but
injury
injury,
risk.
yeah, right, injury.
You
Well,
do.
CJ was going through injuries last season, so
Yeah,
there,
but not consistently the way
right.
with Zach Levine, it's a real
But like
concern at this point.
to me, wouldn't you rather say like, wouldn't you say like, oh, well, maybe if Gobert is there, like, let's try to get a different
Well,
kind of theme going instead of just two shooters.
I can do both. I guess that's my
I,
point. Is
that
it's
is
like
true.
if they go for Bradley Beal or Zach Levine and land one of those guys, I'm going
Sure.
to go, hey, that's a hell of a player to put
Right.
with Damian Lillard. The
Right.
Blazers are probably going to be better. If they choose to go a less, I mean, I'd argue that Rudy Gobert is splashy, but like if you go a less splashy route and go for a Rudy Gobert, or
It's
you
not
go
as
for DeAndre
splashy. Right.
Ayton if they end up making a deal with Phoenix because
Eight.
he gets end up on
Interesting.
the block, which sure looks like hell. Even if it's like an OG
Do
Anunoby
you
move, and
hold
you
on?
bring in a bunch of depth, like I think
Do
there are
you
ways they have many ways to go with it.
do you think there would be any consideration from either party and obviously maybe it wouldn't just be a flip, but like an Aiton Gobert, just switch teams, make it work with some other players and picks here.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I don't know what it would I mean, Phoenix, it sure seems like would have the depth to make that work.
Mhm.
I think Gobert is gonna command a little more than Aiton, but I also think Aiton is younger. Like, I do think that
Yeah.
helps a little bit here is where, the contracts are about the same.
If that
Aiton is a
ask.
little bit more of an asset right now. No, I think Rudy Gobert is a better player, don't get me wrong. And so
Right,
that to that
right.
token, but yeah, no, if I was
And
Phoenix, I'd
from
definitely be trying to get Gobert.
the Suns' perspective, I mean, you're I mean, you're trying to make a run. It's
Well, and the
you
way they
know,
use their centers, like, that's the thing is, like,
right,
Rudy Gobert can play the DeAndre Ayton role. Like, they're not asking Rudy Gobert to, go be Nikola Jokic.
right.
So, I think in that sense, the fit is really well there.
I'll have to ask Tim about that. He DM'd me after I reposted. We'll talk about it. A graphic about the Sixers and the Celtics. And we were joking about it. I'll have to ask him if he'd be interested as a Suns fan in a potential move like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna. I mean, if you're gonna swap Ayton, obviously you got to get another big in there. So that would sure seem like that would be at the top of their list. I
You
think
would
for
think
me, because with Chris Paul's just age and contract, I think you're permanently in contention mode right
right.
now.
That's what I
So to me,
mean.
going for Gobert, yeah, like that's a
You're
win
going
now
for
move.
it,
I don't think you worry as much about the future. I think the question is, what do you have to give up on the back end? Because I think you will
right?
have to give up players there. In
Right.
terms of Portland, like, yeah, I do expect Portland to make a splash. Like, and them having number 7, like you said, is the biggest key there. If they
And
want
well,
to go,
and so I was reading too. They have the ability to essentially I think they have the max space can create a lot of space to
yeah,
essentially just sign a major free agent outright without having to make it work. So that
and I
is
mean, maybe
also
that's
to a
Levine.
benefit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're able to get Levine on the free, like, then I mean, that's the best case scenario, obviously.
Right.
Because at that point, you bring him in on the free. If you're able to then make a trade for somebody, whether it's Gobert, whether it's Ayton, like I said, even in OG Anunoby, like he's somebody who apparently is available from Toronto. That's a little
Yeah.
surprising to me. I
Yeah.
know there's a little bit of overlap with Scotty Barnes, but that sure seems like a not many players want out of Toronto. We've talked about that, but and apparently there's some dissatisfaction with his role. But that for sure surprised me a little bit. I'm
Agreed.
interested, and I can't tell what his market is. It's tough because I think he's really good, but he's another one where he's missed a lot of time due to injury, and I worry about. I wonder if maybe Toronto doesn't overrate him in that sense a little bit, just because, and that's just because of the injury. It's not because of what he does when he's healthy. Like he's a great defensive player. He does all the intangibles well. Like those are the type of guys you want on winning rosters. So that makes a ton of sense. But
Hmm.
it sure seems like he could be on the move. So we'll see. Welcome everybody to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Joining me as always, my co-host Justin Kuzar.
He's really good at the game of basketball.
I mean, he is. Steph Curry is really good at the game of basketball. Was this LeBron? Because
LeBron
can
was
we talk
tweeting.
about
Yeah.
it wasn't LeBron though.
It wasn't. But LeBron, I see his tweets here. He said shot selection versus Golden State, and then the like skull emoji, and then he
Yeah,
did just a chef emoji.
LeBron's a little thirsty for the Warriors these days. It's kind of
No,
weird.
no,
He's
no, no,
brought it up
no, no,
multiple
no.
times, and I know
Thirsty
the
for
rivalry.
Steph. Thirsty
Oh,
for
well,
Steph.
yeah, true. And I mean, look, I get it, but it's like, bro, I'm glad that they, aren't rivals anymore, or they're on
Right. They're
that
cool.
point where they're civil and stuff. Because I mean, it was a great rivalry at one point, but it's like, hang on, just because it's a little one sided right
Right.
now these days, like, we don't need to be sucking up to Steph that much. But Steph
Yeah.
is him. There's no doubt about it. So who tweeted that?
That was Batum.
Oh, okay, all
Nicholas
right, yeah.
Batum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Steph is really good. There's no way around it, man. It's hard. I'm hard, man. It's hard pressed for me. Like, I'm not going to turn this into a legacy talk entirely, and I have to, I guess, flesh out a full list because it would be disingenuous for me to say because whenever you do top 10 lists of anything, it's like, all right, if you're going to move somebody in, who are you taking out?
It's more who are you taking out than it is who should be there conversation, in my opinion. Yeah.
I'm really hard pressed to find 10 better players in NBA history than Steph Curry.
Okay.
I don't think it exists. And I think
Okay.
he should be on the top 10. I don't know where. I know, like I said, MJ and LeBron will always be 1 and 2 for me. I personally have Kareem locked in at number 3. I think he's pretty close to immovable right now. And then after that, it's up. Like there was
Hmm.
a lot of guys. I mean, between Magic, between Steph, between Tim Duncan, between Larry Bird, between Kobe, like Hakeem Olajuwon, and it's tough with guys like Wilt and Bill Russell too. Like, where do you rank them? And so that's where the question becomes. It's like, where do you, how do you sort that out? But I mean, I think Steph Curry's there, man. I think he's got to be
Okay.
there, and that's, maybe that's a little reactionary just off Game 4, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Talk
Sure.
about Game 3 and Game 4. Boston taking 3, the Warriors winning Game 4, which was last night as of recording this. Game 5 will be Monday. We're recording on a Saturday morning. But yeah, either way, I mean, I selfishly am excited right now because we have a 2-2 series. Like if Boston goes up 3-1, that series is over. Like I'm hard pressed to see Boston losing 3 straight. It would have been a little poetic if you're the Warriors to come back from a 3-1 deficit. That would have really kind of come full circle on a lot of things. You know, you talk about LeBron tweeting at Steph, but no, the Warriors needed to win that game the same way I felt they needed to win game two, and they bounced back. So we got a series, best of three.
Yeah.
Buckle up, we're having some fun.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good one, and all of our game 3, game 4 takes to come in just a few moments.
Yeah, leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Amazon Music, anywhere you find a podcast, you can find us.
Yes, and we are on YouTube. If you want to catch a video version of the podcast, we did get subscriber number 38, so we are looking for number
Okay.
39. I looked it up. I think best case scenario of players that wore the number the longest might
Uh-huh.
be Jeremy Grant, Philadelphia 76ers from 15, 16, and 17, or Dwight Howard for 3 years, Lakers for 2 of them, Philly for 1 of them.
Yeah, I think that's
Paul
probably there for
Jones,
both of them. Yeah,
Tolbert,
it's real
yeah.
tough. I mean, or like Greg Ostertag maybe.
Mm. For 2
But
years, though,
yeah.
yeah, it's not as long, like, he only so I don't know.
All
I
right, so you
mean,
get you're either young Jeremy Grant or post prime, but at least winning a championship, Dwight Howard. So I mean, hey, that, honestly, look, Dwight's a Hall of Famer. I'm never going to be like Dwight Howard is the worst option in the world. I mean, I
right.
obviously, if I want Dwight Howard, I want the number 12, like when he was Superman. But
Mhm, mhm.
no, those definitely not as bleak as 38. Put it that way. 38
Right.
was not ideal to say the
No.
least. And
But
now
we
a word from our
appreciate
sponsors.
but we appreciate the 38th subscriber.
We do. Yeah, no, don't leave us. No, we do because you're in the trenches
We don't
without a
we don't wanna
doubt.
go through that again, so we're past it, don't leave, because then we'll have to go through that again.
Yeah, you took one for the team. Now a word from our sponsors.
So game 3, game 4 of the NBA finals are wrapped up, both going in opposite directions for the team. The Celtics winning game 3, the Warriors winning game 4. I would say game 3 wise, if we're just going to go in order, there's a few headline talkers to bring up. Obviously, Curry got injured, and in game 4 proved that that did not matter at all. But there was some concern about that. Draymond Green seems a little, I don't know if he's rattled, but he is getting upset with the Celtics fans for the FU chants. So there's an angle that we got to talk about there. And then obviously in game 3, the Warriors pulled their starters down 14 with 2 minutes left. Kerr said it was not because of the Curry injury. It's just because they were getting worked. So
I mean,
I,
is there a difference like at that point? I
right,
mean, the whole point is when you're not trying to get injured. So
right.
yeah, I mean, game 3 they got smoked. I mean, the best games of the series so far have been game 1 and game 4.
Right. But I would
Game
say game 3 was fun. I mean, it was a very entertaining game for the most part. Obviously, people are going to say they pulled them at the last 2, so I get it, but for the most part that game was very entertaining until the 4th, really.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Because I guess Golden State did go on their patented third
They were
quarter
they were
run.
up by 2 points, and then they took Curry out in the 3rd, and I was like, "What are you doing, Kerr? Why would you
Yeah,
take him out?"
well, and so that's one thing with Steve Kerr is where because Steph Curry was not happy that he was sitting in the fourth last night. Obviously,
Mhm,
that was a super competitive game. I mean, hell, Golden State was down 5 with 6 minutes left, roughly.
mhm.
So yeah, I mean, and I was saying this. I watched this with our buddy Chris Crawford last night. Steph Curry's in 48-minute territory. Like I know you're worried about
You
the
gotta
the
do it,
injury a
though.
little bit
Yeah.
here, but especially last night, it's like, look, if you lose that game, this is over. It's like forget
Mhm.
48 minutes for the rest of them. It's like it's all but over if they lose that game last night. And granted, he didn't sit for long. I think he was back in with 10 minutes left or so. But yeah, I don't think there's any planet where Steph Curry should be sitting for long portions of time. And I mean, that's the story, right? Is the net rating for the Warriors with Steph on versus off. Like when he's off, they're getting absolutely smoked. When Steph Curry's on, they're playing a lot better. Game 3 for me, I mean, yeah, you felt Boston because the last time we podcast, and if you want to hear our game 1 and game 2 thoughts in a little more depth, go back and check
Mhm.
out last episode. But I mean, the theme going into game 3 was just off the physicality of game 2, right? It was like Golden State melted down, Boston went absolutely nuclear in the fourth quarter of game 1. Game 2, it felt like the Warriors got in Boston's heads a little bit. You know, Draymond had rattled Jaylen Brown, he kind of rattled Grant Williams a little bit, and it just felt like they got out of their flow. Game 3 was the exact opposite. I thought they went into Boston and Boston just had everybody rattled. They, again, Golden State had that third quarter where they went absolutely nuclear, which they've been doing all series long and all playoffs long. Like that, it really is remarkable. And it's crazy because last night in game 4, I don't even feel like that was their best third quarter at all. I felt like the Celtics
Mhm.
actually countered a lot of their punches in the third. Um, but it really is wild how it just seems to flip after, they go into the locker room and then it's just come out and they start making everything. In terms of game 3, though, I mean, yeah, again, the fourth quarter, Boston has been owning that largely throughout this series, and they certainly did in game 3. It just got their way. Jaylen Brown has been excellent. I think to me, he's been the X factor here, just because at
I
times
said
Golden State hasn't had anybody to guard him. Like he's just beating them
they
off the
had
dribble.
there was a few times last night. Now, I will admit, I was exhausted last night, so I mean, my first mistake was watching the game in bed.
Oh yeah,
So like I was, you're like paying attention, but you're not paying attention. Um, and I saw, or they were talking about how like Steph Curry was guarding Jaylen Brown a few times, and it's like, why? What?
yeah.
That's not going to work. And
No, no, no.
so obviously, that's what I pointed out in game 1 and game 2, and actually on the ESPN station we have here in our cluster. I was on the show yesterday, and we were talking about that, and I've said I felt like Jaylen Brown was an X factor depending on his production. Like if it's a higher production game, they're most likely going to win. If it's a lower production game, they're not. And I actually said if he has over 17 points, they usually win. So I was wrong. Obviously, in this last game, he had 21 points. But I would also then take the pointer and look over at Al Horford, whose percentages were pretty down and only had 8 points in the game. And it was like, "Whoa, what happened there, buddy? Like, what's going on?" And it almost seems like he's the one that got injured in that little, like, fall dive for the ball thing with Curry over Curry getting hurt.
Yeah, and let the record show, I don't remotely think that that was a dirty play. I think it's a hustle
No,
play. They're
no.
going for the
Yeah.
ball. I don't think it was, people instantly want to compare it to the Zaza play with Kawhi Leonard. I don't even think it was in that stratosphere. I mean, game 3 for Boston, it was just about their balance, right? I mean, you got 27 out of Jaylen Brown. I thought he was the best player there. A little bit less efficient from Jason Tatum, 9 to
Yeah,
23, but you got
very,
26
yeah.
points there. Marcus
Although
Smart had an incredible game, 24 points. But to me, the X factor in that one was Rob Williams. Rob Williams was everywhere. And I mean, this series, he has been like, he's been phenomenal. Game 3, I mean, he was just, in terms of the offensive glass, the way he dominated that, just kept getting them second chance
it's
opportunities. And it felt like every time Golden State would get close and be ready to kind of take control a little bit, Rob Williams would, get an offensive
and
rebound and create that second possession where then Boston hits a shot and all of a sudden it's a little more of a backbreaker.
and I would say too with him, there is that knee concern. I know that I've seen a lot of blogs talking about it. He's been limping a little more, so it's like just that's always a
He's like
concern.
he's at best 80%. And
Yeah,
I feel like that's extremely generous, which is remarkable given how
right.
well he's played this series. I mean,
And
he
I would
has been
say,
absolutely phenomenal.
and to that, Grant Williams and Derek White have also been a big spark for the Celtics. At least in Game 3, specifically, Grant was, and Derek White's always just been that guy that I just keep hearing every so often. That's just providing that little extra spark, little extra push on that offense. So I
He's
felt
been
like that was
shooting. Like he's
right.
just been shooting the ball well. His numbers have been great. Like, I mean, game 3, not as much. Game 3, I think he only had 7 points in game 3, but I mean, largely he's been that X factor in terms of just hitting. It feels like he hits timely shots whenever he comes into the game.
Right.
Um,
So my question to you though is the other underlying topic was Draymond's wife made a comment about it. I know ESPN was talking about it. The F Draymond Green chants that were
mhm.
going on in the stadium. I believe in Game 4, even the announcers kind of addressed it at the beginning of the game. It felt like. What I will say too, like I don't necessarily agree with it, obviously, but s trying to call him out on social media also isn't going to stop it. Like, if anything, that's going to antagonize it, make it happen more, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
you just know what it is. Like, I don't think that. I mean, I guess it's tough because a part of me is like, yeah, I don't think you should say the F word around kids and be chanting the F word around kids. But it's also like it's game 7 of it, or not game 7, but it's game 3 of a
Finals,
meaningful
yeah.
NBA Finals series. Like, we
And
know what Draymond Green does. He's an
right,
antagonist. We know if you love him if he's on your squad, you tend to loathe him if he's on the other squad. And so that's kind of one of those things where my favorite part of that, I guess, because you had Clay most notably after the game call it out and go,
Mhm.
real classy Boston. But then my favorite part was Draymond Green had the presser with his son, and he just goes, "I played like blank."
Yeah.
Without the blank, and his son is right next to him. So it's like, they're worried about like the profanity around kids,
Right.
and Draymond's cursing in front of his kid. Like, I don't that I'm not I'm not about to be the police here of what you're chanting. I mean, we know what Boston is like. It's a rabid, passionate fan base.
Mhm.
Like, it's an East Coast fan base. You and I grew up there. We know how it gets. Like, that's how Philly is. That's how New York is. Like, I would argue that's how any environment is most of the time. Like, I think that's happening in the Bay too. Obviously, it may not be directed towards Draymond. Like, I don't think they have that. Like, the Celtics don't have that target of ire. You know what I mean? Like,
Right, right.
who's the Celtics' most dislikable player from other teams' perspective? Like, probably
Smart?
Marcus Smart. Yeah,
Definitely
but
smart, yeah.
I don't think Smart gets, again, just the rep that Draymond has, and where he has
He
over these past few years.
Right, I think he not it's not like his image has been rehabbed, but coming out of college, he was that guy. Like, people were like, "Oh, this guy sucks. He's a dirty player. Like, we don't like this guy. He's the Draymond Green, like, antagonizing things." And you still see him doing it a little bit. Like, he did it with Curry, I think it was game 2 where, like, he was just kind of being a pest to Curry even when the ball was not going on, and so but, like, you gotta do that. It's the finals. You gotta
Yeah.
rattle him up. It's a mental game too,
It's
man.
also like Marcus Smart is also the defensive player of the year who is
Right.
playing great largely. And that's the thing, is where it's like, I think you get away from that more when you're just not a complete net negative. Like, I think with
Right.
Draymond Green right now, the same way I feel like with all the podcast comments that have been thrown at him with him recording the show after the games, is that,
Right.
it's all amplified because Draymond is playing terrible. I mean, granted, game 4, which we'll get to here in a second, I'm going to start to, kind of transition over to game 4 talk in a little bit. But I mean, I tweeted it last night. He's been largely unplayable at times. I mean, everybody talks about the stats with the points and the foul, and I understand what Draymond does in terms of facilitating the offense, in terms of what he does on defense. But if he's out of control and he's not even looking at the basket, at that point, you do have a real question. Because for me, when the Warriors switched last night and took Dre out and put Kevon Looney back in, or had Otto Porter in, for example, Otto Porter got the start last night. It felt like they were way in a better flow of an offense there right now, where you have somebody that's at least going to look at the basket. Like, to me, every possession that Boston gets Draymond to shoot on at this point is a win. Like, even if he makes that shot, you're living with it every single time. Um, it's just remarkable how quickly his offensive game has just become non-existent. I mean, that's the thing. It's not even like it's fallen off. It is non-existent at this point. Um, Given, again, this is a guy that scored 32 points in a game 7 of an NBA Finals game, knocking
Right.
down every three-pointer that he was taking. Basically, it's pretty jarring. It's alarming. Now, you got to give Draymond. I mean, you got to give Steve Kerr credit for sitting him for large portions of that fourth, including a good amount of closing time. He did come in the last 2 minutes, and I will say Draymond was really good. Got a huge offensive rebound, made a great pass to Kevon Looney for that layup that put him up 5, and that essentially. That essentially felt like the play that sealed it. I know Al Horford hit that corner 3 to make it a 3-point game again, but that was the moment where it put him away. And I mean, I thought Looney was phenomenal too. We could talk a little bit more about him, but I thought for sure on the offensive glass, that was Golden State's key in game 4. Him and Wiggins. I mean, Wiggins had the
Oh, that
rebounding
I was
game
just
of
about to
his
say
life. Like,
Wiggins was probably the second best, and I don't even think it's
no, you
probably
can say it. No,
was the
say it.
second best.
No,
Yeah, he was the second best player. There's 16 rebounds. Are you kidding me?
yeah, his career high is 11. I mean, and I mean, I look at those possessions in the fourth quarter where, the Warriors were down 5 points. Wiggins had 2 straight putbacks where the
Mhm.
jumpers weren't falling, because I don't think, like, the Warriors didn't shoot great last night. That's the thing, is it was like I felt like their looks were good, but largely they weren't falling like that.
No.
I mean, I thought really in transition is when they were getting them the best, and I think there's maybe a key there a little bit. Maybe they found something. Again, it's just push it when you can.
Mhm.
But I mean, Looney really.
Which, by the way, if you look in my like, if you look at the Celtics and Williams is hobbled a little bit from this injury, you would think that would definitely be a potential for a gap for the Warriors. Is you're just pushing it. These guys, one, they like to defend, they like to slow the game down. You guys like to speed it up. Just keep pushing it, man. Just keep pushing it.
And to your point about Wiggins, he's by far been, to me, the Warriors' second best player in the series. Like, he's been, I know it's been a weird path for Andrew Wiggins to get here, and I know he'll probably never live up to the number one pick hype the way it should be. But I mean, you got to give him credit. He, between, just hitting timely jumpers, again, the rebounding, creating those second possessions, like, that was so huge for the Warriors last night. I really do. I'm with you. I think that was the X factor in Game 4 specifically. And just the defense. I mean, Jason Tatum is not shooting well this series. Like, he's getting his baskets. So that's the thing, is it's gotten overblown a little bit. And obviously he's facilitated really well too. And I think Tatum's been excellent defensively. So I think it's been a little reactionary where people are saying that he's been bad. I don't agree with that.
Right.
But, I think Andrew Wiggins is playing better defense on Jason Tatum than I think people have been giving him credit for. Like, he's largely been there in front of him every time. A lot of these shots that Tatum is beating them on are just Tatum making plays. Like, sometimes you just get beat by a player is playing better offense at the moment.
How would you, okay, so we did this, I think, before the series. We talked about the best players. We said it was like Curry, Tatum, and then we were talking about like where Brown would land and all that stuff. Has it changed at all for you? Is Wiggins in the top 3 now, or
No.
you're still saying Brown?
Oh yeah, JB's definitely top 4.
Did Wiggins crack top 4? Is it still 2 Celtics after Steph?
It might be. Yeah, it might be.
Brown.
I mean, Tatum and Brown are locks, and then it gets tough because it's like, is it Smart? Is it Rob Williams? Is it at that point? That's where I'm kind of at with Wiggins.
Without Wiggins, but I would say, and I get it, Curry put in the 40 bomb, but without Wiggins last night, they don't win that game.
Oh, without Wiggins, they're not winning any of these games.
Yeah, right.
Like,
that's
Wiggins,
what I mean.
Has been their number 2 essentially in terms of. I mean, that was the thing about Game 3, right? Is it was like we talked about Klay Thompson. They need to finally get him going. He's largely struggled shooting the ball. They finally got 25 out of him in Game 3, and they lost. And so that was like, oh man, they took the Klay punch. Like, that's a little concerning to say the least. Last night, now granted, again, Klay Thompson hit a big 3-pointer in the fourth quarter to put them up 1, because that was really the story of the game, right? It felt like every time that Golden State would get close, because we knew this was a must-win for Golden State. I mean, this series is over. They're dead in the water if they lose this game. It felt like every time that Golden State got close, I'm talking like they tied the game, they got within 1 point, they would just give up a shot, like on the other end, whether it was, Jaylen Brown was getting into the paint. Marcus Smart did a great job at getting into the paint. Again, timely threes from Derek White, Jason Tatum. It felt like they just were countering everything until that fourth a little bit. Like, when it shifted, give Wiggins the credit for hitting those 2 back-to-back baskets. And then again, Klay hits that shot, and then Steph just puts it away and puts the cap on. Because I mean, look, that's what we're here to talk about, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, Steph Curry, that's probably the greatest game he's ever played. When you look at the circumstances, when you look at them backs up against the wall like that, when you look at how largely inefficient this Warriors offense has been at times, because that's the thing, Boston's defense wasn't even bad last night. They made it like everything like hell. The Warriors barely scored over 100 points. Like, the Boston was locked in last night.
By the way, that's what I think. Like, as a Boston fan, that's kind of like a silver lining for you in this is Curry had the game that he had, and it was still relatively close. And you guys have a bunch of arguments for potentially winning that game if a few things just go your way. So I think that's kind of like the silver lining in this loss for the Celtics, which we've talked about against the Bucks. I think we made a similar thing. It's like all the games that the Bucks won, the Celtics, a few mistakes here and there, and they win that game, and it's not a problem. So it's kind of the similar theme throughout the playoffs, it feels like, with them. And so I kind of have that same thought process for this game, where there's a lot of silver linings where, yes, it sucks you guys lost, but there's a few moments you can point out and say, we had it. We had it right here. This was us. And Curry was doing his thing, and we were fine.
In a way, that's what's disappointing if you're Boston, though, because that's what they did against Milwaukee and Miami,
Right.
right? Like the story of those two series for me is that Boston was largely the better team for large portions of both of
What
those
did you
series.
say? Played with your food a little bit.
Right. They played with their food a little
Yeah.
bit. Now, I don't think last night was them playing with their
No.
food as much as it was just we got a masterpiece from Steph Curry.
Right.
Like 43 points, 10 rebounds, the degree of difficulty on these shots. Like that's the other thing. I mean,
Yeah.
he had 2 or 3 3-pointers with Derek White just draped on him. He might as well have been
Yeah.
just on his back at that
And
point.
one of them was a no call too, I'm pretty sure
Oh
if I
yeah, and he
remember
was
correct.
mad. No, he
Yeah.
was mad. He was
Yeah.
barking with the crowd, but I mean, he was feeling it. And it was fitting because there's a lot of people who, this was the type of game that I think people irrationally felt like was missing from Steph Curry's legacy, right? Like you wanted to see him have that one game where he took over when it mattered. He's already a multi-champion. I think that was way overblown to begin with, but I mean,
Right.
that's the way it feels like. With LeBron, I always go back to probably that game against Boston, with Miami, the game 6 with them on the line for the elimination, or some of those games against Cleveland in the finals against these Warriors in 2016
Mhm.
with Steph. Like that's the game that you put on the reel a little bit, especially if they go back and win this series. Like if they were able to make this happen, but I think you look at it, and I think his teammates knew it. Like Clay said, they got to be better. Draymond, who we'll get into a little bit because we have a whole discussion there. Again, still the finish, but for Steph Curry, like that was the masterpiece. This is the guy who has clearly been so far the best player in these series. I mean,
I agree.
individually, like there's no doubt about it. Even in losses, he's been, going out putting up 30 every single night. The shot is on. He was locked in. Again, 10 rebounds. The defensive effort is there as well. I think that's been the underrated portion of it, is that he's really helped command on that end. Um, the Celtics defense, which we've rightly vaunted as the best in the league, they've had 2 to 3 guys just trapping on him. Like you've got Draymond Green, who we said is not basically a factor in this offense
He
at
shot
all.
he shot 14% in
Nah.
game 4. He was 1 for 7, missed both of his 2 three-pointers. I mean, again,
Oh, and the
had
and the
8
one and
assists
the
and 9
one was a
rebounds.
putback dunk in transition.
Yeah.
Like, let me be as clear as
Yeah, yeah,
possible. Like, there was no one there, and he caught the ball and dunked it. Like, it was.
yeah.
I mean, it was an absolute
He
masterpiece from
he
Steph
yeah.
Curry. Like we said, you talk about the top 10 legacy games. Like that's one that I'm always going to flash back to, regardless of how this series plays out. I mean, the way he's carried this offense, because like I said, these are difficult shots. That's the most impressive part to me, is the degree of difficulty. It's not
Mhm.
like in game 1, it felt like Boston kind of sagged off a little bit, right? And he was just drilling open look after open look,
Well,
which
and that's
right,
dude,
we
and
know he's
that's
going to do.
I watch it and I didn't see it as much in game 4, but I think it was game 3. They were talking about it a lot with Williams, was when Curry runs through or runs past the pick, the big man, which is usually Williams, has to step up, has to be willing to be at the 3-point line right there the second Curry comes around, or he's going to make
Yeah.
that shot. And it's the smallest gap every single time they were showing it. It's the smallest gap, but if you give him that gap, he gets the shot off. He's got such a quick shot. It's up, it's in, and then he's moving and he's shimmying, and and the crowd's yelling.
Yeah, and I mean, you could see it. Like you could see it in his emotions last night.
Yeah,
Like
he was
they
feeling it.
needed it, he needed it. They understood the circumstances, and I mean, give them credit. They made the adjustments and they got the job done. I think realistically, again, you feel good if you're both squads. Like I feel the same way I did after game 2. Like if you're Boston, I think you hang your hat on the fact that you're 7-0 after losses. So you're going to game 5 here. They've this is what they've done all year. This is their MO. They've gotten punched in the face and they've responded
And
every
you
single
respond.
time.
Yeah.
Now
Mhm.
it's going to be a test. They're going to the Bay. Like that's the thing, is we got 2 out of 3 in Golden State, so that tends to favor the home team. But
Yeah.
again, this Boston team hasn't really been like they're in a way. I want to say they're kind of road proof. I'm not worried about where they play. I don't think that they're going to ever get themselves shook like that. The Warriors, give them their credit too. They're 6-0 off losses as well, keeping that streak going last night. That certainly was in a lot more danger than it's been in a while. But again, handling their business, I think on that hand, you go, hey, all we needed to do was split in Boston. We've got 2 or 3 at home. We're coming back here on Monday in game 5. I do think game 5 is the key. I think the Warriors, at least for the Warriors, like the Warriors to me have to win game 5. If the Warriors don't win game 5, you're running the risk of going into Boston. And I know we just saw Miami do it in a game 6 in an elimination game with Jimmy going crazy, but I don't want to do that. Like
No,
I am not
you don't want
giving
to. You don't want
Boston
to
the
do it.
chance to win a championship on their home floor. I think, and that just again, because you win game 5, worst case scenarios, you're playing game 7 on your home floor. I'll take those odds every time.
And I made a bet with my coworker here. I think I took Boston in 6 or Warriors in 7.
Yeah, both of them, you're fine. Then you're
Mm-hmm.
golden. Because I realistically, I think those are what's going to happen. I know there's the thought of with the alternate, they keep winning off the losing, so that to that school of thought, Boston's going to win game 5, Golden State's going to win game 6, and then Boston's going to win game 7, which would be hilarious because the degree of difficulty there
It'd be so
feels like would
wild.
be completely
Right.
flipped.
Right.
I mean, if Boston wins game 5, I do think they're going to win in 6. And I think if you're again, let me I'm going to pull up the tweet, but this has been it's funny because the eye test in me feels like that Boston has been the better team, and again with their defense it just feels like it's easier for them. Like it feels like Boston has gotten into the paint better at times. And again, Golden State I think stepped it up specifically last night, but okay, here you go. So this is from Law Murray on Twitter at Law Murray the NU. And so this is regarding the stats here between 4 games. So you got the Warriors are leading the Celtics 422 to 421 right now. Both teams have made exactly 64 3-pointers. The Warriors have one more offensive rebound, 40 to 39, which feels crazy with how well Rob Williams has played. The Warriors have one more takeaway, 60 to 59. The Celtics have made 7 more free throws, and the Warriors have made 4 more field goals overall, which
So tight.
in a way, that makes me feel better about the Warriors because if I'm going off eye test, I feel like Boston's been the better team here, and I still feel really good if I'm Boston. Like it wouldn't stun me at all if they come out here and win Game 5. I think the bigs are the key to go. You mentioned Rob Williams' health, and we mentioned Draymond. Like Draymond has been unplayable at times. Like it's pretty jarring to see. Now, and again, I know he bounced back. Like it was good to see him close that game as strongly as they did. They needed it, but I mean, I'm hard pressed to not be playing Kevon Looney and Otto Porter Jr. more at this point. I mean, hell, even throwing Bleats out there, it can't be much worse than what Draymond is giving you. Like, I know the intangibles, I know the leadership, I know what he means to this team. But I would, man. I think you got to go back to look at Steph Curry. It's like Steph Curry was coming off the bench at one point when Jordan Poole was healthy and he was still easing back in. Like, if you want to lock in and win the series, I think Draymond may need to know that, like, hey, maybe it is time to come off the bench here for a sec. We're not going to unplay. It's not going to be a situation where he just doesn't get played anymore. But Steve Kerr made the adjustment last night. I'm wondering to see if they didn't kind of figure something out there.
Feels like they'd be able to push the offense a little bit more too, with those guys potentially, and that just might be from an eye test perspective. But
it opens things up for Steph.
Yeah.
You can't put 3 defenders on Steph when you have a player that you actually have to guard a tiny bit. Like they're not even respecting Draymond right now. Like I said, if he takes a shot, I'm viewing that, even if it's a floater, I'm viewing that as a win for Boston. Like I'm taking that possession every single time.
I agree with you. I get it.
But in terms of Boston, yeah, again, it's Rob Williams' health. And I mean, it's Al Horford, too. Like, Al Horford, he had 26 points in game 1. I think he's got 21 combined in the next 3.
Something happened.
Largely MIA from game 4. And that's the thing is, like, it wasn't even like he was bad. I just didn't notice him. Like, it didn't feel like he was remotely involved. And especially in game 3, where it feels like he and Rob Williams, like, that was the key where they dominated those matchups. It feels like once they put Looney back in, it became pretty unplayable quick. And if I'm playing one big for the Celtics, I'm going to stick with Rob Williams. I think he's been better in the series, even with the injury.
I completely agree. So I'm excited for it, man. I'm hoping it goes the distance, or at least 6 or 7, obviously, because I want my $1 Venmo for my coworker, but also bragging rights. So
I'm just glad it's, like I said, as an objective NBA, objective as we're both Sixers fans, but no, as an objective NBA fan, I was glad Golden State won last night because I do think this series would have been over in no more than 5 or 6 had they lost last night. Like I'm with you. I'm rooting for the 7-game series. It's been pretty fun for the most part. I mean, these have largely been competitive games outside of a kind of a lopsided end towards game 3 and 4 or games 2 and 3, I should say. But Yeah, regardless, either way, I'm really, really interested. Do you have any gut feeling? Like, do you think Boston's going to win? Do you think Golden State's going to win Game 5?
And I feel like it's just reacting from game 4 and Steph going supernova. I really am feeling the Warriors in 7 bet that I took now. Um, but
See, I said Warriors in 7, but I don't feel good about it. I think
yeah,
Boston's going to win Game
what
5.
did I think I said Warriors in 6 when we first started. So I definitely,
It's
I
just
don't
the degree of difficulty has felt harder for the Warriors, and I guess
agree.
that's my point. Like
Agree.
Boston, it feels like is just getting better looks. I mean,
Well, put it
granted, it
this
feels like
way.
they're hitting a lot of big shots. Like Derek White last night, every shot he took, it felt like you just knew it
Put
was
it
wet.
Well, put it this way, when the Celtics core is having a good game, the Warriors are pulling their players with 2 minutes left because they're getting worked. When Steph's going
Yeah,
supernova, it still feels like the game could go either way. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
there is a
yeah.
level of that too. So from the difficulty side of things, it does favor, in my opinion, the Celtics a little bit. So, you know.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. It's the defense, but yeah, what a game for Steph Curry. I mean that's as good as it gets. You're not going to find many
Mhm.
better ones than that. All right, who's balling? Who's falling? Our NBA version of the stock market. We always like to start with the good before the bad. So Justin, start with you this week. Who is balling?
For me, it's actually going to Curry, Thompson, and Draymond Green. The stat I saw on Reddit: the most finals wins by an NBA trio in the last 50 seasons. Curry, Thompson, and Green have now tied Duncan, Parker, and Ginobili with 19. The Warriors had 27 road wins in a playoff series together, these three guys. So that's pretty cool stat, and maybe able to pass them depending on how the rest of this series goes.
Yeah, I mean, again, anytime you're mentioned with that core,
Of course.
um, rarefied air, and I mean, it is this run most impressive for the Warriors. Like, regardless of how it plays out, is just because I think most people thought it was over realistically after KD left and Toronto that loss in 2019
Hmm.
with the Clay Thompson injury. Just again with the natural aging of Steph and Draymond, and again give credit to the Warriors front office for rebuilding it and winning kind of in the margins here a little bit. Filling out that roster and building it back up to contend. But I mean, again, that speaks to Steph. Like Steph has brought this squad back up. I think Clay and Dre both know it. I mean, Clay and Dre are every bit as important as they are. Like this is a multi-championship core we're talking about. But you can see it last night when they both were like, "We got to give them a little more." Steph has bailed us out for large portions.
Yeah, you guys got to step up.
Put some respect on that man's name. Like I'm convinced the reason that Steph isn't in more top 10 conversations is just because he looks like a guy you'd run into at the Y. Like
Hmm.
LeBron James is such an athletic freak. Um, you look at a guy like, look at the other superstars of the league, like guys like Jokic and Embiid who are just so massive.
Massive. They're so big. Yeah.
Jason Tatum is this big 6'7" wing. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 6'10", Greek, looking like he's straight out, chiseled out of a statue. And then you've just got Steph Curry, who looks like a guy I'd run into like at Publix somewhere,
Yep.
but who will just quietly like kill you and then just like drop 40 on your head and walk out and you won't even know what happened.
No
So
big deal. Yeah.
yeah, just casual. All right, so balling for me this week is I've got Danny Ainge, and so Danny Ainge towards the end of his Celtics tenure got a lot of criticism. I mean, some of it deserved because I think a lot of it was personnel wise, most notably with the IT trade. Like I will always maintain that that's kind of what did Danny Ainge in when Kyrie, especially when Kyrie didn't work. But if you're going to make that type of trade after everything that happened that season with Isaiah Thomas, with how beloved he was, with obviously his sister passing in the car crash, like
Hmm.
it's kind of heartless. Like there's no way around it. Like you're really running you're towing a line there. But Danny Ainge, since 2014, every Boston draft really has given them a key piece here. You got Marcus Smart, obviously sixth overall in 2014, a massive contributor. Terry Rozier in 2015, who that's probably one of the rare misses, honestly, in the sense that Terry Rozier is really good. Like that's somebody they probably should have kept. They traded him for the Kemba deal, which I completely understood at the time. And in a way, Kemba brings you back Al Horford. So
Yeah.
in a way, it kind of works out, but obviously drafted Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and then even Robert Williams and Grant Williams, 22nd overall in 2019 for Grant, 27 for Robert Williams. Those are everything is homegrown here essentially. I mean, other than Derek White, even Horford. I mean, Horford, I'm never going to say get homegrown. Just because of it. I mean, Horford made his due in Atlanta. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's kind of got lost a little bit. Like, Horford was awesome in Atlanta for 9 years. Like, that's where he was Al Horford, like, at his peak. He just, unfortunately, played in a conference with LeBron James. Now, for sure. I mean, again, I think he kind of burnt it in some spectacular failures, most notably with Kyrie and how that played out. Kemba, I don't think is necessarily a failure just because they were smart enough to get out of it and bring Al Horford back. Like, the thinking was there. It's just, unfortunately, Kemba just kind of got washed. But yeah, regardless, the drafting has aged well in hindsight, without a doubt.
Well, that kind of leads right into my fallen, which we kind of talked about off the mic, was a graphic that was going around and was sent to my DMs by multiple people.
Do you have it? Can you pull it up?
Yes, I can. Well, yeah, give me a second. I'll pull it up, but I'll explain what's going on here as well. Is essentially Basketball Forever on Instagram posted this graphic that was hold on, I'm trying to see if I can find it real quick. That was pretty much saying the 76ers whiffed so many times, which essentially built this this squad, the Celtics squad that's there right now. So the post says drafted Markelle Fultz over Jason Tatum, drafted Ben Simmons over Jaylen Brown, took Thibault over Grant, let Udoka go as the assistant coach, traded Al Horford for Danny Green. All things that, like, at the time made sense, especially the Al Horford wasn't working, right? Like, that just was not a thing.
That's why this graphic is balling. I mean, this graphic in hindsight, yeah, of course you could say all that, but like none of that was true in the time. Like that's taking any nuance. The most ridiculous offense out of that is letting Ime Udoka walk. Like,
Yeah.
and keeping Doc Rivers. That to me is the most flagrant part of it. Markelle Fultz was the consensus number 1 pick at the time. And so that's why, obviously, like, horribly it is aged. Like, clearly you take Jason Tatum, you don't even think twice. And just because directly with the trade, that will always be linked to that. But, like, let me be as clear as possible. Markelle Fultz was the consensus number 1 pick going into 2017. It just didn't work out. Like, that's not because of ineptitude, though.
Yeah.
Same thing with Ben Simmons over Jaylen Brown. Like, Jaylen Brown was widely projected as a project to the Celtics correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, and the Celtics correctly give them the credit for taking him at 3. Because I think there were a lot of people. I mean, Chris Dunn was the projected number 3 there. I think there were a lot of people who were a bit surprised when they moved up, but you saw the potential. Obviously, that has extremely worked out, and that's best case scenario. Give me a break. Again, same deal. Everyone was taking Ben Simmons at the time. It just stinks that Ben Simmons is a bozo. The Grant Williams over Thibault, same deal. Like, we're talking a fringe difference there. And I think plenty of people were still high on Thibault. I don't think there's that much. Like, I would rather have Grant in 2022 just because Grant Williams can give you a little bit on offense, where Thibault's pretty much like a complete net negative there at this point.
Right.
But that's not the type of trade where I go, oh man, that's the Sixers' fault. They really blew that one. The one is Udoka. And with the signing of Al Horford, getting Al Horford off the books was just the cost of doing business. And you brought Danny Green back, who at least is a useful player who helped the rotation. Al Horford, of course, is going to fit better in Boston and OKC, because the Sixers' bozo move with Al Horford was that they just maxed the center to play next to Joel Embiid when they had Joel Embiid. Like, Al Horford wasn't bad in Philadelphia. Al Horford didn't fit in Philadelphia. And that's why it was kind of one of those situations where, like, that's easy to go, oh, it's the Sixers messing it up. Well, yeah, the Sixers shouldn't have signed Al Horford. That's
what also felt like
is that they should not have brought him here.
It felt like they did it just to get him out of Embiid's way from the playoffs previously.
It was that, and they panicked after the Toronto loss because Embiid was not 100%, and they were worried about the backup center minutes, because that's where the Sixers got killed at. It's just, you don't max your backup center. You go out and get someone, I mean, in this year, like Andre Drummond, the way he played for them, like, that was the type of player that they needed to sign, not another center. The gravest sin the Sixers ever committed during the process era is letting Jimmy walk. Like, plain and simple. That's all what it comes down to for me. I'm convinced Jimmy and Embiid win a championship now if they're in Miami or if they're in Philly. Like, if you put either one of them in each other's respective situation, I think they win by now. The second one to me is trading Mikal Bridges. Trading Mikal Bridges on draft night was unforgivable at the time.
While interviewing about how he was
Dude,
excited.
it was so ridiculous at the time. And then even now, it's even aged worse in hindsight with how much he's developed and how good he's become. But
Yeah.
no, those two to me are way above. The Fultz and Tatum thing stinks in hindsight, but that's strictly a hindsight thing. And it stinks because the rival got Tatum. If Tatum was good elsewhere, it just wouldn't hurt as bad. It just is bad because he's with Boston. But the graphic
Well,
lacks
and
lacks
because
nuance, which I guess they win because we're talking
And
about it. But like,
hold on, but I would say it also hurts more with Tatum because we switched those picks. Like we
oh yeah, for sure.
and that's another big part of it too.
Yeah, but again, they took the consensus number one pick.
Yeah, I know.
Like the Lakers should be getting that too because the Lakers took Lonzo Ball, but nobody that is avoided as well. You know, Jason Tatum loves Kobe so much. All right, falling for me this week is Brandon Ingram. Which this is like the most minor fallen of all time. He's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks because he had finger surgery. He's not going to miss any meaningful action. He'll be back for training camp, but regardless, just not able to get some reps in over the summer and having to recover here a little bit off surgery. But yeah, hopefully a smooth recovery. He'll miss a couple of months off season work.
And they should be in general a fun team to watch this year coming up for 2023. So.
Yeah, look, if they get Zion, like that's what it all comes down to. It's like they were fun at the end of last year. Like you loved all the depth that they brought on. Herb Jones is great. Jose Alvarado was great. Grand Theft Alvarado. CJ McCollum really came in and shook up the culture. Jonas Valanciunas was great all year. Like the key is Zion, but apparently everything seems to be going great on that front, which is what you want. No, I mean that was the whole point of trading for CJ and trying to play competitive basketball was to kind of get Zion in a way to buy back in. It sure feels like he's bought back in now, and that's the most important.
And I guarantee if they didn't play well at the end of the season, we would not be having those headlines right now. It'd be the opposite. We wouldn't
be having those, but give David Griffin credit for taking the swing. Sometimes you got to take the swing, even when it may not, sometimes you got to punt the future a little bit to kind of stabilize your now, if that makes sense. All right, so Kenny Atkinson is your newest Charlotte Hornets head coach. It was basically down to 2 between him and between Mike D'Antoni. The Hornets brass has been interviewing them here over the past couple of weeks here, and have decided to bring in Atkinson. 4 seasons with the Nets as the head coach from 2016 to 2020. He has 118 career wins, 190 losses. I will say that's probably a little misleading because the Nets were absolutely horrible when he got there. They were still firmly in the grips of rebuilding from the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade. Did make the playoffs the first year with Brooklyn before he got fired. That was that season where they lost to the Sixers in the first round in 5 games with D'Angelo Russell. Jared Allen was on that squad as well, but spent the last 2 years assistant, a year with the Clippers and then a year with the Warriors. He's on the Warriors bench right now. So when he's done this year, he'll be headed to Charlotte. I think this is a really good hire as the short version. I just remember, I was shocked when Kenny Atkinson got fired and left the squad. Basically, that was in March. That was, he had coached 62 games with the Nets that year and they were doing well. So it was quite a bit of a surprise when they let Atkinson go. And it felt like if he ever wanted to get back into head coaching, that his name should be floating around. I thought he did a quality job in Brooklyn those 4 years. Any failures they have, I don't blame him on coaching. And so to that point, D'Antoni, the thought of putting D'Antoni with LaMelo Ball is just so appealing. Having him and Miles Bridges and just having them fly all the time. But to me, I like the Atkinson hire a little more. I think it's less splashy, but I think Atkinson is really going to kind of drill his team in on defense a little bit. Kind of play more of a fun, free flowing offense, but make it a little more maybe fundamentally sound than D'Antoni would have. And so to that token, I think he did a great job in Brooklyn. I think this is a good hire for Charlotte. And Charlotte's got a fun roster. That's the thing is they're coming off a playoff run last year. Obviously, the main piece with them is LaMelo Ball, but the way they play offense, just the free flowing, high flying type of running the floor. I think that Atkinson could fit in really well here. And I think again that this was the smart hire for them. Again, Miles Bridges great last year in the MIP conversation. You've got Terry Rozier, who we talked about here a little bit ago. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see, as they kind of build this roster out, with the draft this year, what they do on that front as well. I think they need to get a big. It's probably the most important thing. I'd like to see them get a kind of a more traditional 5, but I'm excited. I'm excited for their future here.
So I actually was able to obtain live video and audio from the first conversation of LaMelo Ball and Kenny. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, all right, let's hear it.
Okay, hold on. Here it is.
Hey, what's up, little man? I'm gonna make this the regular. Come in every day, put in the work, put in the hours, and one day, that title gonna be mine.
But you already have Rookie of the Year.
Nah, Employee of the Week. I'm Lily now. There he is. Hey, what's up, little man? I'm gonna make this.
I do love that one, man. So, what commercial have you seen? Because that's a solid number 3 for me. But I've been having this debate. What commercial have you seen more during the course of the NBA playoffs?
No.
The Matt Stafford AT&T commercial where he talks about trading his old phone in and how he loved it and all the time together, or the Zach LaVine and Charlie Day Mountain Dew commercial?
It's got to be the Mountain Dew one.
Dude, I hear it in my sleep.
Yeah,
dude, I hear it in my sleep. I'm telling you, Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other ones.
It's on all the time. It was on hockey the other night, and it blew me off because we're at the point now where it's nice. But first off, I should have started this at the beginning. The NBA final schedule makers are assholes. And I've been saying this for years, but are you kidding me? We are starting at 9:00 on a weeknight on the East Coast.
No way am I making it through that game. I can't even stay awake till 9:00.
If you want to do it last night on the Friday, okay, fine. But there is no planet where a game in Boston should be starting at 9:00 on a weeknight. Yeah. I don't care about the West Coast. Y'all are started at 8. Started at 8, and they'll be at 5. So they're all getting out of work. That's fine. That way, it's equal opportunity for everybody. I get you got to try to balance as much as you can. You got Golden State in the West, obviously, but oh my God, it is so ridiculous. And just the days off. I don't understand. This was nice with game 3 and 4 because we had 2 days, but just the non-travel days, having 3 days off is absolutely insane. In a way, it's nice because in the in-between, I've just been watching hockey. Because there's usually one hockey game a night. They're in the conference finals at this point.
Curry said something about travel. I wish I could find the interview, but you just made me think about it. And I remember being confused by his comment. It was after game 4. I heard it this morning, maybe. He said something about it was great only having 48 hours off. If we had 2 days off, it would have been crazy. We would have been thinking about it for so long. And I was like, what? Isn't that exactly what?
Well, especially with him coming off the potential foot injury, which again, obviously that was not clearly a deal in game 4.
Not a problem. Yeah.
Is your wife okay after the Rangers missed that wide open net in game 5 the other night?
She is a little upset. She is convinced it's over. So.
Oh, it's over. I don't don't play this around her, but no, it's over. They lost. That was the moment. The Lightning are so good when you're on your home ice the way they were, and you miss the wide open net. But it's not even that because they could have gone in overtime. But when you let Sergachev score with 1:30 left, it's over. Now the Lightning are going back to Tampa. The Lightning have all the experience. It's just crazy that Tampa is going to potentially win 3 Stanley Cups in a row in a sport that is full of probably more parity than any other. But also, can we talk about Tampa just lighting up the city of New York? You knocked the Islanders out in 2 straight conference finals, and now you're maybe knocking the Rangers out. They looked like Snoop Dogg in that video back in the day, just kicking the skyscrapers over.
Well, that was my beef with people. The narrative everyone always talks about is you could pick 3 teams in the NBA, and that's who's going to win it all. It's okay, well. In hockey,
I don't think so this year at all.
I know, but it's okay. Well, in hockey, the same team has potentially just won 3 years in a row, so you can't even try that.
You want to talk about hockey's been as dynastic as NBA has the past few years. The last 5, I guess, Stanley Cups have been won by 3 teams. The Penguins won 2 in a row. The Blues had that 1 year in between, and then the Lightning have the last 2, and they could very well win 3 in a row this year. I mean, you look at the NBA. If the Celtics win, this might be the biggest. I'm pretty sure that would be the first time the NBA's had 4 or 5 different champions in a row since the 70s, most likely. Because you You got Raptors in 19. You got Lakers in 20. You got Bucks last year in 21.
And then
And
potentially
so
Celtics.
either way, like, so if the Celtics win this year, it'd be 5 different, because then even before that, the year before the Raptors, 2018, you go back to the Warriors and make it 5. Obviously, if the Warriors win, it kind of resets at 4 a little bit. But I mean, that's as much. I mean, yeah, you can't really find a streak before that. Obviously, you've got Cleveland and the Warriors alternating. Before that, it's the Spurs and Miami. Like, there aren't many weird in between years. Like, where this year, these past few years, it's felt like there's been a couple of those. I mean, who are the blips really in the 2000s in the NBA? The only 2 I can think of are the 2011 Mavs, where they just won the one, and the Pistons. The Pistons in 04 with Sheed and Rip Hamilton and Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace, that whole squad, Tayshaun Prince. And even with the Pistons, like, they ruled that East for a little bit. They just only won one. I mean, you go back again, Spurs, the Lakers, the Celtics in 08, I guess you could say, are one of those as well. But I mean, even the Celtics were in the finals again in 2010. So it's just with hockey, it's surprising, because even football's been more dynastic. But we don't need to go down that route. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Driving Dish NBA podcast. Appreciate you guys as always. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, anywhere you find a podcast, you can find us.
Yep, and give us a follow on YouTube if you want to watch a video version of the podcast. You can find us, Drive and Dish NBA. You can search us, and we will pop up.